Hello, Dr. Vanya.
Hello, how are you, Dr. Schaefer?
Doing well, thank you.
Good. Our focus verse today comes from Matthew 23, verse 12. All who exhaust themselves will be humbled. You repeat that.
Yeah.
All who exhaust themselves will be humbled, and all who humble themselves will be exalted. Again, it's Matthew 23, verse 12. And our focus, or our theme this week is humble service. Wow, such a powerful and timely topic.
The gospel, according to Matthew, includes Jesus's warnings about self-aggrandizing intentions and behaviors. And we all enjoy being appreciated and encouraged in our efforts to serve. We talked about that a little bit last week. But Jesus cautions against transactional good deeds that are done for public recognition. How do you think that we can discern sincere efforts to serve versus transactional attempts to gain power and prestige?
Mm, that's a good question that I don't have an answer to. And I don't have an answer to it because the example that we see now so um, visibly is the transactional example.
That's
And, you know, we need to refer back to verses like Matthew 23:12 to remind ourselves that we don't need to exalt ourselves. That, but the examples that are put in front of us every day are the example of people who exalt themselves. This, as you said, self-aggrandizement and humility is not something that we see as our example.
I remember one time I went to a banquet, and it it was really quite a humbling, embarrassing experience because at the time I was an officer of the organization that the banquet was for. So I made this assumption that there would be a place setting for me near the front on one of the reserved tables. Just an assumption. And I sashayed myself right on up to one of the lead tables and started to take a seat beside one of the people that I serve with a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the ushers just kindly came to me and redirected me and said, "No, you're not at the you're not up here." And they reseated me, back with everybody else. And I was so embarrassed because it was just, but it's almost aligned with that scripture that said the one who tries to put themselves at the head table will be moved back and embarrassed. And that happened to me. That was a very humbling experience. And um, I agree with you that because of the era that we're in, that there's so much that's transactional and it's hard to distinguish. My thinking about it is you almost have to know somebody over a period of time in order to discern the difference between someone who really wants to be in relationship and kind of be living life along with versus I'm I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that 100%. Yeah.
Those of you who are listening in, go ahead and put some of your experiences in the comments, and hopefully either Vanya or I will think of an experience where we were actually humble and someone then exalted us.
Give an example of me being humble. You know what I do in my professional life. I try to be very humble with that, but I was honored recently, and I was like, well, there's no way that I can receive this award. But one of the things that was mentioned in my letter of recommendation was that I served humbly, and I was like, wow. Someone once said to me, "Wait until you're invited to the table." And I try to do that. I'm not always successful, but I try to wait, and I try to wait in the background until somebody invites me in. And I was very surprised that I was one of 4 people who received the award, and it surprised.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I think about that both of us professionally have been on the educational side,
Hmm.
and oftentimes our accolades come years later, normally at the right time, but we have to take some pride in what we do, knowing that maybe some 5, 10 years down the road, somebody will come back and give you a pat on the back and say that you made a difference, exalt you, when you least expect it.
That's a very good point. I know that I try to write notes to some of my educators from the past when I think of how they've influenced my life. Maybe that's one of the things that we can encourage the people who are listening as you have your conversations in response to these questions. Maybe you can reach out to someone who has served humbly, who you would like to acknowledge for their humble service. And think of some examples of either exalting your own self and being humbled, like I had that experience, or as Vanya just described, of humbling yourself and being exalted. God bless you, and look forward to seeing you here again next week.
Oh, it is Jesus. Yes, it is Jesus. It's Jesus in my soul. For I have touched the hem of his garment.